Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Sneha and today I'm sharing my top 10 warm toned eyeshadow palettes. As you guys probably already know, I love eyeshadows and especially warm toned eyeshadows I think really suit my tan, yellow, golden undertone. So if you're also a fan of warm eyeshadows, I think you'll enjoy watching this video. So I've picked out 10 palettes as I've mentioned before. I'm going to go by the number of eyeshadows in each palette. So I have palettes that have just 5 eyeshadows all the way up to 35 eyeshadows in one palette. Also the cost of these palettes vary quite a bit. So they range from the lowest being at $16 to the most expensive one being over $100. So starting with the first palette, which has 5 warm toned eyeshadows, and it's the Makeup Atelier 5 eyeshadow palette. This is what it looks like. So it comes with 5 eyeshadows ranging from a light shade all the way to a dark brown. So this palette retails for $35 US. 2 of these are a satin shimmery finish, whereas these 3 are a matte, but they also have slight micro shimmer running through it, but if you blend it into the crease it doesn't show up, so they are more or less matte. Now these pans are removable from this particular palette, so it's good if you want to depot them into any of your Z palettes. These formulas are also meant to be non-creasing and water resistant. So I really enjoyed the tones in this palette, especially this first shade. If you've heard me talk about this palette before, if I had to choose one eyeshadow for my inner corner highlight, this would be it. This first eyeshadow right here. It looks like white in the pan, but it has a beautiful yellow golden shift to it, and that's what I have in my inner corner right now. So you can see that, and this is what the swatch looks like. So a heavy swatch looks white with the periphery of it looking golden, but if I were to blend it further, hopefully you can see that it's more gold than white. So I would recommend this palette to anybody who is not a big fan of warm eyeshadows but would want to incorporate warm tones, every once in a while. So then you can go for the smaller palette where you have just 5 eyeshadows to work with, of which this one is not really too warm toned. So you can still work with these other 4 and they really create a very nice soft and blended look on the eye. So this is the palette I would recommend. Next, going up on the number of eyeshadows, this palette has 6 eyeshadows, so just one up from the last one, and it's the VISEART Theory palette in the shade Minx, and this is what it looks like. It has 6 warm toned eyeshadows. Now this palette retails for $45 and you get 3 mattes and 3 shimmery shades. And again, these pans are removable from this palette, so you can pop it out into any Z palette. And these are designed to blend very seamlessly and stay all day on your eyes. Also, they do not test on animals if that's of a concern for you. But this is a very nice beginner palette, I would say, that's not too warm toned. So these 3 tones can be your everyday shades. You can just pop any of these shimmery ones onto the lid and you have a really simple eye look. So I would recommend this for anybody who's a beginner in makeup and just wants a few warm tones. All of these are warm toned, but the ones that are truly warm are these 3 shades. So you have one copper metallic shade right there, and these 2 are also warm compared to the other shades in this palette. So I would recommend this palette to any beginner who doesn't want too many warm toned eyeshadows yet wants to get everyday looks using the same palette. So this is a really nice pick. Moving up, I have a palette with 8 eyeshadows, and it's the SMASHBOX Cover Shot palette, and this is the shade Ablaze. So this palette retails for $29 US and contains 3 matte eyeshadows and the rest are all shimmery. So 5 of them are shimmers, and of the 8 eyeshadows you get 2 eyeshadows right here on the top, which are twice the size of these shades on the bottom. So you have one side which has these nice pink toned, plummy, berry toned shades, whereas the other one, it has more golden, orange, earthy tones. So I really enjoy using this palette. These are great in the pigmentation. They are relatively easy to blend, and the brand is also cruelty free. So I would recommend this palette for those of you who already have a basic eyeshadow palette but just want to add in some warmer tones. So this mini palette would be great for that. Next is a palette I don't own just because I have so many warm tone palettes, but it's something to consider if you do love warm eyeshadows and want to try out that. It's the Huda Beauty Obsessions palette, and I'm going to insert a picture right here, and this is the shade Warm Browns. This palette retails for $27. You get 9 shades total, but only one of them is a shimmery finish. So if you love your mattes, that's a palette you might want to consider adding. Tons of warm shades in this palette. And I think this palette will look good across all different skin tones, from the lightest to the darkest skin tones. Moving up to a palette that has 12 eyeshadows. It's the Urban Decay Naked Heat palette. This is what it looks like. This is on the pricier side compared to the other palettes we've spoken about. This retails for $54 US. It contains 7 matte eyeshadows and 5 shimmery or metallic eyeshadows. And I think these shades will look good across different skin tones, so that's a plus for this palette. A con with this palette is that a few shades do look kind of similar on the eye. So at least on my skin tone, He Devil, Cayenne, and Fuego, all of them tend to look similar. But again, it's a warm toned red oriented palette, so I can see why the undertone for all these shades would be the same. It's a palette I really enjoy, and that's what I have on my eyes today. Now, an alternative for this palette, if you have lighter skin tones than mine, and you find that the Naked Heat may be too intimidating for you, you could consider getting this Tarte palette. I'm going to insert a picture right here. It's the Tarte Toasted palette. It retails for $46 US, and it again has 12 eyeshadows, but they are more lighter and muted versions than the Urban Decay Naked Heat, I feel. So that's something you might enjoy if you are a beginner and you do not want too many warm tones, or if you have a lighter skin tone. Next, another 12 pan eyeshadow palette, but this is all matte. It is the VISEART Warm Matte Eyeshadow Palette, which looks like this. It retails for $80 US. Now, this is a palette I would recommend for anybody who loves matte eyeshadows and loves warm eyeshadows. Or if you're a makeup artist, you may already own this one. You have almost every shade imaginable for creating any warm look. You have your lightest shade for brow bone highlight, to your transition shades, a lot of them, all over lid shades, crease shades, and you have your really dark defining shades as well. And then you also get these 3 enhancers on the side, which you can mix with any of these eyeshadows to create a different undertone for each of these eyeshadows. So that's something lovely about this palette. And I love incorporating this or pulling this in when I feel like any of my other palettes are missing a nice matte transition or a brow bone highlight. So I tend to use this in conjunction with other palettes, but you can also create an all matte warm look with this particular one. And with VISEART, the quality is excellent. You get amazing pigmentation, great blendability, and lasting power. It stays true to its color all day long. Next, at number 7 is an eyeshadow palette which contains 15 eyeshadows, and it's the most expensive of the lot. And you guys probably have guessed it by now. It's the NATASHA DENONA Sunset palette, which looks like this. It retails for $129. It has 8 creamy mattes, 1 metallic eyeshadow, 4 crystal eyeshadows, and 2 duochromes. These are just lovely in pigmentation, intensity, yet they are blendable, which is very surprising, and I've created so many looks with this palette and I continue to love it. So this is a palette I would recommend if you truly love eyeshadows but want to step up the game, you want something high quality. That's the only time I would recommend this palette, because it is too pricey. Now, they do claim that these eyeshadows are supposed to last on your eyes even without a primer, but that's not true. I have very oily eyelids, and I've tried using this without an eye primer and they did not perform half as well in terms of pigmentation, and secondly, they did crease on my eyes. So I would highly recommend an eye primer even if you're using something high-end like this. So an affordable option or a dupe for this particular palette is the COLOURPOP Yes Please palette. I'm going to insert a picture right here. That one contains 12 eyeshadows, but it's kind of a rip-off from the Sunset palette by NATASHA DENONA. You can see that they have very similar colors. So if you just want to see how yellow or some of these gold eyeshadows look on your skin tone, that might be a better option for you. So that palette retails for $16 US for 12 eyeshadows, of which 8 are mattes and 4 are your shimmery or metallic finishes. Moving on to a palette which has 24 eyeshadows, and this is a drugstore one. It's by Makeup Revolution, and it's called the Life on the Dance Floor Guest List version. It has this beautiful rose gold packaging on the outside. It retails for only £10 in the UK for 24 eyeshadows. And based on the pictures online, I think 6 of them are shimmer while the rest are all matte eyeshadows. And it's a very warm toned palette, as you can see there. So that's a great bet for anybody who wants a relatively cheaper drugstore product. I do realize that in the US it might be slightly more expensive. I think it's around $18 but still quite affordable compared to many of these other palettes we've discussed. Next, moving on to a palette which contains 28 eyeshadows. It's the Sephora Pro Warm palette, and that retails for $68. About 19 or 20 of these are matte, while the remaining 8 are shimmery. And I haven't used it personally, but I've heard good reviews about this particular palette, so that may be one that you might be interested in checking out. But again, tons of warm eyeshadows in there. Especially if you're of a lighter skin tone, I think this palette has more range, especially with the lighter to mid-tone warm eyeshadows, so that might be a better bet for you. And then finally, we have a palette with 35 eyeshadows, warm eyeshadows, and it's the Morphe 3502 palette, which I'm going to insert right here. This palette retails for $23 for 35 eyeshadows. Of these, 24 are matte, and the remaining 11 are shimmery or foil finish eyeshadows. Now with this palette, the only con I see is that you do not have a lot of transition or brow bone or highlighty shades. Many of them look like, at least in the pan, they look more like crease shades or definer deepening shades. There are some lid shades, the metallic ones, and I do like that there is a black eyeshadow in here, but I do think this palette is lacking on the lighter range of eyeshadows. So do keep that in mind if you are checking this one out. You might need to supplement it with some other palette. And that's it, guys. That's all my picks for warm toned eyeshadows. Let me know in the comment section below which warm toned eyeshadow palette you own or that you absolutely love. I hope this video was interesting, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!
Open eye, feel the waves cut through me.